This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast, and hope you are doing well. It's time to kick off some good times, and we're going to welcome back today. We got James, the man of steel himself, Cole, keeping it real.
Yo, what's up?
What's up?
How's it going?
And then we have a new Superman to add to the family, the Superman of Plaid. You might returning guest, Mr. Logan. What's up, buddy?
So glad that I got to be on again. Thank you guys so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Like, this is exciting because this is, I would say, months in the making. Because Logan and I met in June back at Superman Celebration, and he had heard me talk with Anthony Desiato, our friend, about today's content. And I told him, said, yeah, we're going to do ours later in the year. I didn't want to do it right away because I wanted to give it time. He's like, oh, that'd be cool. And I was like, well, you want to join us? Bye, Sayla. And he was like, yes. So we are here today to talk about Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor by Mark Waid and Brian Hitch.
A story that has become, at the time that we talked about it, it had literally just landed. I mean, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks before Superman Celebration, the third issue ended, has become controversial since then. Like I've seen lots of fanboys all over Reddit and stuff fighting over this book.
Right. And that, the biggest thing, the thing I want to, if the listeners do not know, is the first issue came out 2 years ago. I had this written down.
It came out around the time World's Finest started, right? Like, it was like as soon as he came back to DC, they tried to get this off the ground.
I mean, yeah, it was a big deal. Mark Waid was coming back to Superman. It looks like it came out July 25th, 2023. Okay. And, it was supposed to be consecutive. So Issue 2 came out March 19th, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Issue 3, the final issue, okay, my friends, April 23rd, 2025. So that means I think we recorded, in May. So right before Celebration.
Yeah.
So first of all, I've said this many of times. James and I preached about this years ago when they were doing Doomsday Clock, about how they announce a book, start releasing it, but then they get behind and it starts to become years before it's completed.
Yeah. At this point, I really wonder, and I love Brian Hitch's art, don't get me wrong, but I really wonder why at this point, if you hired him for a book, especially a miniseries, you would release any of it before he was done.
Exactly. It's only 3 issues. I would have announced the book after issue 2 was complete. And I wouldn't have released it till issue 3 was complete, so that you keep that hype engine up, you build up the story, and then boom, there it is.
Yeah, that was nearly 2 years. That's wild.
Yeah. So I bought the first issue because I was so excited, and then I thought for a long time, was I going to buy issue 2 and 3 or just wait for a trade, and then I did buy issue 2 and 3 because I like this format. That the oversized books that we get that are like this, I like these. So I was like, okay, I'll buy them, But what was just surface level? James, we'll start with you, then we'll go Logan. Just the first time you read this, because I know, James, you had read it before, but we just never had talked about it. What was your first just thoughts?
Well, actually, I'd only read the first issue before, and then it had been so friggin' long in between. I lost track of it, and I didn't finish it.
Mm.
So this is actually finishing it here for the first time. But I mean, first impressions, amazing art. I mean, they're doing like everything. There's a lot of Superman highlights, and then Superman being Superman, trying to save Lex and the whole deal.
But
I mean, I thought it was pretty great. A lot of the just where they had gone from, a lot of different places and times and people that they interacted with.
Okay, Logan, we'll let you talk, being the guest. Just first thought, and everything. Just having completed this and read it.
Okay, so I read it. I did not read it when the issue first came out in 2023. I got on this when they re-released the first issue, like the month before number 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was smart. It was like again for the first time.
So I read it the first time, not all at once, but more or less, monthly. And then I really loved it that time. And I read it, and I'll tell you this, I read it in physical copy that time. Mm-hmm. This time I read it digitally. I still really liked it. I don't think I liked it as much. I will admit. I think the biggest thing is I think that Hitch's, and I went back and looked at my physical copies to back this up. I think Hitch's art loses something digitally. I think that gloss on the page that you have in the wider canvas.
Yeah.
I don't know really how to explain it, but his art and his proportions just become much flatter. And actually, famously, his art on Ultimates, which is not a comic I really like, but the art is exceptional. A lot of people feel like that kind of revolutionized comic art in the 2000s. And so to double check myself, I went and looked and saw what Ultimates looks like digitally. And it is not as impressive on a screen as it is on a page. So I think there's something interesting going on with his art. I wonder if in years to come, people will not understand what a moment his art was in the 2000s because of the format that they're taking it in.
That is a good thought.
It kind of made me sad because I really like Brian Hitch's art, but I just don't think that it translates to that flattened out screen visual. I think that so much of what makes his art so interesting is the textures, and you lose a lot of that digitally. The other, and I'll be critical up front because assuming you still feel like you and Anthony did on the other episode, and like as far as I can tell, at least 60% of any given listeners might be feeling. There's a lot of people who don't like this. I think I'm probably going to be more positive. So I'll start negative. I have the same critique with this that I do a lot of Mark Waid's Superman. I think that Mark Waid's Superman stories for me almost always top out as a B+ because he is so married to the Bronze Age Superman, which is a version of the character I like okay, but is definitely not my ideal Superman. And that is a criticism that I have of World's Finest. It is a criticism that I have of Mark Waid's Justice League runs. And it becomes a criticism that I have of this. There are a lot of decisions and lifestyle things that are very Silver Age or Bronze Age in this about Superman. That is not my ideal Superman. Having said that, I can still acknowledge that it is a very valid take on the character. It's just not my preferred one. So that steps in the way of this for me a little bit. But past that, I think that there's something really interesting here. And if you want me to put a pin in this, we can talk about it a little later down the road. I don't mean to babble so much.
You're good. No. I'm letting you go. You're the guest. Me and James talk enough. It's cool.
There is something fascinating happening in this with Mark Waid's depiction of Smallville.
Okay, hold that thought. I want to hear that as we get into it, because I want that dissected a little bit more. So.
And that is my favorite part of this. Is not only the way that Smallville and Lex Luthor are depicted, but if you have followed Mark Waid's career and know his life story, there's something very beautiful happening with Lex Luthor's arc in this, but there is something even more beautiful happening in Mark Waid's arc of how he interfaces with his childhood in this comic. And I think there's a reason that as the backlash has come out, we have seen in several interviews, Mark digging his heels in that he feels like this is the best thing he's ever written. I don't know if it's the best thing he's ever written, but I think there's a good chance it is the most personal thing he's ever written.
I'll say the personal. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Best thing, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'll tell you too, I think a lot of the people who don't like this like Birthright more than I do.
Now see, like Birthright's definitely be up in this discussion. Like it cannot not happen. Okay. I love Birthright. It's like an A- because I've come to love certain aspects more and more over time. But my ideal suit, because he talked about writing Birthright like a movie and like a mini series for a movie, and like my ideal like Superman based kind of idea comes from kind of mixing the small side of Secret Origins and how Birthright starts.
Yeah,
I could have not done the big invasion style, but I think that's because I was just kind of burnt out on that. So we're gonna move to James real quick. Thoughts real quick, James, on Birthright.
I mean, same as you. There's some parts that I like. I mean, it's still one of my favorites, one of my favorite origins, especially early on and then the very end. I always love the ending, at least of him getting from the parents' side. That's something as a parent you'd be like, that would be that would be amazing.
So we're going to talk Birthright first, and we don't have to go into great details, but the idea is, I can't remember if this is something that we've all said or if it was something that Waid said himself, that this is kind of like a spiritual sequel. I can't remember, because I feel like, one, if you make it a spiritual sequel to Birthright, it works better, because still one of my biggest issues with this story is the story is so big on the relationship of Lex and Superman, but because it's so much them, what's their history together? Who is this Lex Luthor? Like, what is his history with the world and Superman? For me to really, like, what's the backstory? I guess is what I'm saying, is like, to go this direction with Lex, I feel like it would need to be like a sequel to like Birthright. Like, oh, this is where their story continues, for me to feel the weight of his choice. Part of it might be because, recently I've read The Last Halloween, but I went back and I read Haunted Nights, The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and then The Last Halloween again. And you see, even though that was written over periods of time, you couldn't have just put the last Halloween out and been like, this is a story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, it's the continuation of this series. So you know the weight that's in it. And I feel like with the last days of Lex Luthor, I need to know who this Lex Luthor is.
Well, I think
does that make sense? Like,
yeah, and I think that if you go back to Wade talking about it in 2023 interviews, like on Word Balloon, he was much more firm at the beginning that this was a Birthright sequel. But then I think as when you get to the interviews he did around the final release of the last 2 or 3 issues, he that's when he starts calling it a spiritual sequel. Or I think his exact quote was, there are pieces of Birthright in it. So I think maybe as Hitch's artwork evolved, he realized, oh, visually this is not going to be a Birthright sequel. As far as what, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I can take a little bit of like the different, because to me the art is important. Okay. And I mean, we haven't recorded about last Halloween as of this recording yet, but like, if many people may or may not know, you know, Tim Sale passed away.
Yeah.
And every issue is you know, dedicated you know, to him. And it's still Jeff Loeb's writing, and it's artists doing kind of their style of Tim Sale to a point, like still his formatting, but it's not him. But you still feel that the story is the story because it's the same writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because even with Mark Waid as the writer and Brian Hitch as the artist, I feel that you could still make it more of like the conclusion to Birthright. Like if Birthright's the beginning of their story, this is their end of their story.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be something behind the scenes that didn't go according to plan with this, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a communication breakdown with Hitch just refusing to use the Krypton designs and character designs from Birthright for whatever reason. But it definitely, like, I think if you could get someone to play the audio and keep your eyes closed, it works as a Birthright bookend.
Yeah.
But what stops it is looking at what this Superman looks like, what this Lex looks like, what the flashbacks to their childhood look like, you know. But I was going to say, though, I think one of the reasons that this still works for me is, you said, what is the history of this Superman and Lex Luthor? This is the Bronze Age, 100%. This is Mark Waid writing an ending to the Lex and Superman that he grew up with. And it is a very Bronze Age idea. It reminds me a lot of Elliot S. Maggin stories, where you have a very, and I don't mean this negatively, I love Elliot Maggin, but you have a very saccharine character decision that is thematic to an aspect of real life, and then the rest of the story is built around that one moment. Almost every Elliot Maggin Superman comic is like that, and this is like that.
See, I appreciate that opinion because I am not that well versed in a lot of Bronze Age stuff. Like, it's coming up in the future of the podcast to dive into the Bronze Age, but that is like one area that I am not that well versed in.
It is an era that I like a lot of Bronze Age stuff, especially Elliot Maggin.
I've read some of his. I read his novels.
Marv Wolfman's Superman stuff in the Bronze Age is super underrated. Cary Bates has some really good stuff from that era. Like, and I think that for a generation of comic fans who started with the Silver Age goofiness, and then around the time they were in their teens, got the Bronze Age Superman comics, that was such a step forward in story quality that for them, it will always be the most beloved form of Superman. And because of that, Byrne will always be a sort of betrayal by DC of that. Whereas I was born in 93. I don't know where you guys land age-wise around me, but like my first Superman comics were Mullet Superman. And reading back to, go ahead.
40, baby, this year. Boom.
Right on. And reading back into Triangle. So we're all in the same boat. Like Triangle era, Byrne era, Superman was our default. And the really interesting thing that I don't think people talk about enough with that is that they say that Byrne got rid of Superboy. And I think that is I think that is missing a trick, because I think what Byrne really did is he took what worked in Superboy comics and what worked in Superman comics and smushed them together, right?
Okay.
He made the Superboy secret identity vis-a-vis his family and his upbringing Superman's status quo, while keeping Superman's power and characterization and confidence, right? And then he threw in a healthy splash of George Reeve Superman. That was his childhood inspiration. And I, as someone who comes to Superman, I love Superman because I grew up on a dead farm, right? So when I wanted to be alone, I went to the barn. All of my neighbors were farmers. That aspect of Superman is what stuck me to the character as a kid. He was the only superhero whose environment looked like mine in those Triangle era comics on Smallville, right? And prior to Byrne, that is so much less an aspect of the character, particularly in the Bronze Age. And in Wade's Superman now, that Superman is much more cosmopolitan, much less sort of stereotypically masculine, right? A little less rough and tumble. And also, most significantly to me, much more isolated and othered. Like that to me is the real defining thing about the Bronze Age Superman, is he has the separation that Silver Age Superman had, but Bronze Age Superman feels it so much more. And when he has free time, he's not spending time with Jimmy and Lois. He doesn't have a family. Bronze Age Superman spends his free time in the fortress alone in simulations of Krypton, or experimenting on like a Kryptonian, dog that he's trying to clone and failing, and it makes the whole of the character so much more sad and lonesome, which is just not my Superman, but it is really, really Wade's.
You say that, and I like the idea of I'm kind of, this is my tribute to the Bronze Age. I'm writing the end. Cool. Like, that's great. But for a reader or even new readers, period, it's like, okay, I might have an issue with that because I didn't read the Bronze Age.
Oh yeah. Well, and the visuals again don't lie. I mean, it doesn't look like Birthright. It certainly doesn't look like the Bronze Age.
So let's get into the books, and I'll read a summary and then we'll break it down and we'll kind of hit on these points as we go. Because I think a lot of my stuff will come up, and part of my biggest thing is in the first issue. But Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, #1. Mark Waid and Brian Hitch reunite to tell a tale centered on their favorite superhero. Superman learns Lex Luthor is dying, and he wants the Man of Steel to help him find the cure for whatever is causing his rapid decline. While the world wants to say good riddance to Luthor, Superman will go to the ends of the universe through different dimensions and across time to save his foe. But just why does he want to save the person who spent his life trying to destroy him? And will he even be able to find the solution? All right. So let's look at issue #1. First of all, I like the cover. It kind of makes me feel like Superman is like an angel.
Yeah.
So we'll let James. here, kind of start off with the book here. We don't have to go like page by page and just talk about it, but we can kind of look at it. James, if you want to start out how the book opens up here. James, you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah, so the book opens up.
It happens. It's a podcasting mistake. I mean, it happens in every show.
It does.
We just leave it in. We don't always edit it out because it's funnier that way.
It is. And it's usually me who's muted.
Hey, some people edit sometimes people edit their stuff so that it sounds like nothing happens. We're like, yeah, my kids are running around in the background, my dogs might bark, and then when I yell at my dog, it sounds cooler because my dog is Scooby and Crypto. So it's like Crypto. But continue, James.
So the book opens up and we get Clark remembering a Lex and a fire back in Smallville when they were young, and The Last Days of Lex Luthor by Clark Kent. A giant robot ends up destroying, starts attacking this island, and everything it's doing, like the island is collapsing. It's plunging into the sea, and Superman shows up. He obviously he rips into it, and it's Lex Luthor. I mean, we could tell by the color of the machine that it was going to be Lex Luthor.
You don't say.
But Superman, he saves the island. Of course he does, right? And that's when he sees that the entire crew, everybody on the ship of this machine, is dead. Lex killed everybody here. And he reveals to Superman, has him look inside of him and see that he's dying. Tells him that it was a kryptonite experiment. That's when he kind of challenges him, and he ends up broadcasting this to like the whole world,
So pause right there. Lex tricks Superman into basically revealing that he's going to help him to the whole world. Now, my question to you guys becomes this. Is Superman doing this because it's the right thing to do, or is it because he feels guilty of stuff that happened between him and Lex in the past, and they have not been able to repair their past?
I think that in this story, Superman and Mark Waid believe that what Superman is doing is the right thing to do. I think that whether or not it is actually the right thing to do, you could debate for 1,000 years.
Because, and this is, I will not jump on my high horse here. Is it only because it deals with kryptonite and kryptonite exposure that he's willing to do all this to save just Luthor? Because if that's the case and it's supposed to prove that Superman will do everything he can to save someone, this goes back to, why isn't he finding the cure for cancer? Why is he not putting all those resources and all those scientists in all the places that he goes to cure cancer for humans? Because then it looks like Superman doesn't care about that's my biggest thing. Is like he's willing to do all this to save Luthor, and to me, it has to come from a place of, I feel guilty for our past, for our history. I still see good in him and want to help him because he's never achieved that compared to everything else.
I think that the way that it is framed, and again, it is a very Silver Age kind of idea, is that Superman would never knowingly let any person die. to what I think in this and in other stories has been highlighted is, I mean, it's a very similar moment in Superman Up in the Sky is really almost to the point of absurdity. And I think that buy-in, whether or not you can swallow that question, really is going to determine most people's mileage with this comic. Like
that's a really good way of putting that.
If you have a version of Superman in your head who would move a planet to save a squirrel or whatever, then I don't think this comic is going to bump you at all. But I think if your ideal Superman, you know, kills Zod, kills Doomsday, kills Conduit, kills Cyborg Superman, you know, if you have that sort of more Triangle era farm boy, sometimes you have to put a sick animal down Superman, then this, or if you're not a huge Superman fan, that's the other thing. One of the things is I really like this comic. If I asked somebody, are you a Superman fan? And they said, he's all right, I would never give them this book.
And I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that if you're in that camp, then this is a lot to swallow. Especially when you think, I mean, how many people does Lex try to kill at the beginning of this comic?
Right.
Not even getting into all the other Lex Luthor appearances. Just in this, just to get Superman's attention, he tries to kill an entire island.
Right.
It's very difficult to rationalize not just saving that guy's life with the abilities he already has, but do you want to save spoilers for when we get to them? Or?
For trying to stay in the context of each book while we're there.
Well, yeah, I'll say that even here, it's a hard hill to summit.
Because like Luthor's look in this reminds me, as a sinner, thinking a little bit of, like you said, Super Frenzy, Super Frenzian, you know, going back to, like you said, about the Bronze Age and everything.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, this is full on jumpsuit mad scientist Luthor. There's no business connections. There's no mercy.
Yeah. So it's definitely just scientist Luthor that, you know, explored with or experimented with kryptonite. So we'll get back to James, who's so quiet.
If it's a sequel to Birthright, though, is he supposed to be at least have these business resources? At this point, he's not like a head of Luthor Corp or nothing, but does he have those resources?
I'd say there's a no prize argument for at the end of Birthright, the criminal prosecution he suffers moves that Luthor to this Luthor, right? Like in this timeline, that mad scientist Lex is a necessary response to his loss of resources for what he did in Birthright. I could write that away.
Yeah.
Just that does
thought.
Go ahead. Yeah, no, that gets into the gray area that is part of the problem with this as a sequel to Birthright. Is it's hard to tell what is and what isn't in that timeline.
And that's why I think I said before is like this is like watching Star Wars, then watching Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, like we didn't get our Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Where we would be like, oh my gosh, we learned so much. You know, we learned about how things that, you know what I'm saying?
Sense. Yeah.
So like the development. So from now on, okay, let's look at this, right? Let's look at this as if we didn't get Birthright. Mm-hmm. And Birthright doesn't exist. We are only going to look at what is given to us in this book. And that's how we're going to do for the rest of this. How are we going to feel? So,
I mean, in some ways, I think that works a little better even because, like, as far as whether or not you buy this Switch, because, you know, for the sake of argument, let's say that this is like you know how in the Nolan Batman movies, it turns out he was only Batman like twice if you watch the whole trilogy.
Oh,
right?
yeah, He's only Batman for like a couple of years. Like,
you could very easily make the argument of like they had this relationship as kids. Lex did at least one evil thing before this because they've clashed, but it could have just been one, and then maybe this is the next time, right?
mm-hmm.
If Lex is at the end of like a brief crash out of some kind, then I could see Superman much more easily making the argument that he would save him than I can the Lex who has been assembling legions of doom and torturing secretaries and and all the other stuff you associate with a fully fledged Lex Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because like normally when you tend to like follow writers, they tend to use a lot of their own material as the basis for their stories when things move forward, So, I mean, you can almost see, like you said earlier about World's Finest, a lot of Silver Age and Bronze Age kind of influence in there and the way that he writes. I mean, like he had Lex Luthor in there basically with the Legion of Doom again kind of thing, It's
and I do think
you see those types of those same influences. Like this could definitely stand alone as like a Silver Age or a Bronze Age type story.
Exactly. And I think that if from listening to interviews where he talks about it, if Wade were here and he had the question of, where is the Empire Strikes Back, he would say that every Superman story is the Empire Strikes Back between these two, right? Like you have Birthright at the beginning, you have all the Superman comics you've ever read, and then he views this as the end.
Right.
I don't know how well that works, but I do think that's how he sees it.
Right. And it's kind of like the Grant Morrison about it's everything ever happened. And it's just, and to me, I'm like, I get that.
Except
I understand that.
I will say this, though. I think it's everything that Mark Waid likes that ever happened. Because, like, Clark and Lois do not appear to be married. There is never any indication in this that Lois knows that he's Superman. There are no Kents.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an old, gray-haired Superman like Kingdom Come or Earth 2, right? So he's presumably everybody's still about 30, and this is the end of his career, right? Like, I do think that even if Mark is giving that excuse, he is being choosy. He is explicitly cutting out all of the John Byrne stuff because he doesn't like John Byrne.
No, you're great because that's the problem is it can't be everything's the middle. It'd have to be like the Bronze Age is the middle,
right? And even then, not really, because visually everything's different, and I promise you, he's not including. That's the other thing with Bronze and Silver Age is when Superman fans say that's the best era, they're always being very choosy. They're always usually talking about just Elliot Mack, just DC Comics Presents, and they're not, and they're ruling out a lot of goofy stuff. And I guess every fan does that with their favorites to some extent, but even then, I'm sure Wade is not taking everything.
Yeah. So back to the book. We're in Smallville now, James.
Yeah, we're in Smallville where we kind of see Lex is being bullied. Clark kind of gives him a little hand, but Lex is very very emotional. He kind of flips a switch when he's happy, and as soon as it happens, he can turn upset and run off. And Clark tries to be his friend a couple of different times. They see he sees a comet out in space, and I like where he even asks him how he'd even know where to look. And he says he was just messing around, and he was literally out there flying among the asteroids. Which that's kind of like, I mean, that's a very like Silver Age thing, like him being a teenager and being able to take deep space flight like that just for fun.
And more than that, I got the impression that he specifically moved that comet to show it to Lex to cheer him up.
Oh, okay.
He staged the whole thing.
See, I can see that.
Yeah, because it kind of looks like he's pushing it, like from behind in the art panel.
Yeah, maybe.
this is the part that I get the most mileage out of in this comic, and I think that if you know Mark Waid's backstory, his personal backstory, that's what made this comic mean so much to me.
I love the Smallville stuff.
Yeah. Well, Mark Waid was born in rural Alabama, to his words, I'm not trying to insult his family, but to a very dysfunctional mother and father. And he was so smart that he skipped 2 grades in school, which meant he was 2 years younger than all of his peers and was picked on for that a lot, and didn't really have any friends until he got to leave on a college scholarship. And if you track the history of Mark Waid writing rural communities through Impulse and Birthright and JLA Year One, early in his career, it is very negative. Impulse is constantly discovering monsters and abusive parents and, kind of hillbilly mafia stuff. Mm-hmm. And finding out that this like idyllic Alabama town that Max Mercury has moved him to is actually this sort of seedy, corrupt, Flannery O'Connor-esque, almost like a Gotham, right? And then you move to Birthright, and they have almost these same instances, but it is much more negative in Birthright on the people of Smallville, right? Explicitly saying in Birthright that they didn't understand Lex. And Birthright also has a moment where Waid takes the time to have Superman absolutely demolish a criminal who is sitting in front of a rebel flag, which is, I'm not saying that guy's a good person, but if you grew up, and I'm from Georgia, if you grew up down here, that is saying 2 very specific things.
Yeah.
Right?
I hate always saying grow up because like I moved around a lot. Well, not a lot. I mean, I moved around, maybe not a lot, but I lived some of my childhood in Mississippi. I lived some in Virginia. Yeah. So
you got to see what I'm talking about.
Yes, exactly, and even in parts of Ohio, like where we are now, there's still things.
And it's less that way now. I don't think people from the South who read that Birthright book now, it's going to read the same way as it did in the 2000s. At the time that comic came out in Georgia, I was not that far removed from the rebel flag being our state flag, right? Mm-hmm. It had just been changed a couple years before that comic. So that criticism at that time was not just of that man's ideology. It was a very cultural, intentional thing to put that flag there. And I'm not saying Wade's wrong. I'm just saying that is indicative of how he felt about his upbringing and where he was from at that time. Now, jump forward to this. We have a much older Wade, and he adds some very intentional moments to the same scenes from Birthright, where Clark circles back later, and you find out that the people of Smallville were actually okay with everything Lex was doing. They just weren't okay with how he was doing it. And also that Lex had these hysterical outbursts, which is new from Birthright. Mm-hmm. And that Lex's impatience and his inability to emotionally process the stimulus around him was more a trigger to the people of Smallville than his intelligence was. And that is one of those things where that fascinates me, to see that arc from this author with this background, that he was a kid who was smart enough to jump 2 grades in school and now is reflecting on this with Lex Luthor. That's the part of this comic where I can't say it's bad, because I think that there's something really beautiful in that.
No. I think if I remove myself from the Birthright and just read this for what it is, I can enjoy it more. But I do wish I felt that there was more modern, quote unquote, history to what do you call it? Their relationship than just stuff in the past. So I understand what kind of things they've been through together. Because here we see as we go through the book here. This is Lex Luthor's first time being in the fortress and actually understanding what the fortress is. So that's something, that makes this in its own thing, and I like that, he takes Lex on this journey. And it's kind of like if this was like the Smallville Lex, how he would like that Clark, I think would do everything he could to save Lex Luthor.
I agree. I think that's very true.
So if I look at this and I'm thinking, all right, this is like Smallville. This is like the season after season 11.
The problem with that is, and Desiato will box my ears if he hears me say this, but I don't believe that Clark wore the costume for 11 minutes consecutively. I think that's my only problem with that. Is I think that looking at how he behaved for 10 seasons and then how he behaved in Crisis, I think there might have been a pretty good month that Clark was being Superman.
Yeah. Oh no, like I've made my peace with Smallville, but at the same time, it's similar to my problem here, and we'll get there when we get there. Is kind of like once you open the can of worms, you can't put it back in the bottle.
Yeah.
Once you've revealed Superman to the world, you can't just all of a sudden like, nope, no Superman anymore.
Yeah.
Especially with all the villains and everything he had to fight, he just one day say, oh, I've cleaned up the world and then I'm done. But we have Lex Luthor in Kandor, and they can't find a way to cure him.
A Kandor that is the size of a van, which I thought was a very weird decision.
I thought it was like the size of a bus.
It's huge.
I mean, it is still a very miniature city, but
yeah,
it is huge. It's not.
It's definitely still a small city. I don't know if that still counts as a bottle.
It looks like a pill capsule.
Yeah, the terrarium city of Kandor might be more accurate.
And then, okay, so let's go here. They go into the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, they figure that the phantomness, the intangibility, would completely suspend all of his metabolism, even what the Kandorians had discovered was working separately than his own metabolism. So even if they were to like freeze him or suspended animation, it would still kill him. And that's why they decided to go to the Phantom Zone.
And this is one scene that on reread did not work for me at all. This is Phantom Zone scene. I think Wade was one step too smart for his own good here, because I think that once you establish that through sheer concentration, people in the Phantom Zone can touch you briefly, you have a good enough argument for why Lex can't stay there. It's basically they all would have just concentrated really hard and beat him to death each once, right? You didn't need the moment where all of the Phantom Zone people pool their will and push him out of the Phantom Zone. Because if you guys can do that, why don't you do it to Zod, right?
Maybe because Lex came in there with his body. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also, can we just... Zod is a character that one thing that's always bothered me with Zod is they've never been able to agree on what Zod's symbol is.
Oh yeah, they
like,
go with the like
Man of Steel. Yes,
they
which
do.
Which is very weird because we all know how Mark Waid feels about Man of Steel.
Yeah. I was very surprised by that as well.
I don't know how Brian Hitch feels.
Thing, yeah.
but you think like I just telling you like I just feel it's really weird, you know? But yeah, like you said, they get pushed out of the Phantom Zone. And I think it's interesting they go through the Phantom Zone through Kandor.
Yeah. I do, for what it's worth, I do prefer this symbol or others like it to be Zod's symbol than the New 52 idea that Zod's crest coincidentally also looks like a Z. I don't know. My suspension of disbelief, that's one step too far. I can buy that Superman's symbol could look exactly like an S, right? But
Yeah, because his last name isn't Superman, it's L.
right.
His symbol is.
But the idea that Zod's happens to also look just like a Z, and those happen to also be the first letters of the names that they ended up with here, that's just a little more than I can swallow.
Yeah, I agree. Oh,
I think you muted yourself.
I did. And then the last. And that's where it goes to his complaining. He says, "Let me in, Lex. Open the door. I'm sorry. Forgive me. This is all my fault." End of chapter 1. Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor, coming. Issue 2 on sale. September 2023. Wow. And I am surprised they kept the same cover art like tease that eventually does come out in book 2. So
it's interesting. The digital version has a lot of variant covers that I have never, like, I'm in my comic shop a lot. I never saw one of those variant covers on the shelf ever.
Here's our. Go ahead. Here, no, I was gonna say here's our description for Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor #2, released Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Superman continues his mission to find a cure for what's killing Lex Luthor. When the present has no answers, maybe the future will. But will the Legion of Superheroes help Clark find a cure for a man like Lex Luthor?
Well, so you spoiled it. They go to the future. They go to the Legion, and even Brainiac 5 can't fix them.
But so here is when we start. This is our daily planet, and like you said, this is our exposure to Jimmy and Lois, and where she says something really cool here. Hold on, I'm looking for it.
Well, while you're looking, we've got a poll. Should Superman save Lex Luthor? And 89% of people who've taken the poll said they're against Superman saving Lex Luthor.
The madness of crowds. But I do my ideal Superman. My ideal Superman does understand. I think he would try to save Lex if he could, but I don't know that he'd go as far as he goes at the end of this. And I definitely don't have problems. I have other problems with Man of Steel, but I definitely don't have a problem with Superman like snapping Zod's neck or anything like that. I think my ideal Superman, again, knows when it's more merciful to put a sick animal down. That's kind of how I see it. I know that Mark Waid super does not feel that way. So I can just accept, that's part of our difference of opinion. But
in this, they do go to a little bit of the. It's not just that everybody sees. It's not that he's just saving him to save him or anything. It was that if he has that ability to try, especially given the circumstances around what's killing him, if he makes that choice as to let him die, what does that make? How does he make that choice for everybody?
Yeah. And what does that say to the other people on Earth?
Exactly. If he's willing to sacrifice Lex just because of who he is, then in the eyes of the rest of the world, anybody else can be sacrificed.
It's good stuff. It's deep. I think the problem is like we'll never have a perfect answer. But back to the book. It goes to the Legion. 31st century battle. Literally in the battle. And then, like you said, you know, we have Brainiac 5, you know, and then we cut back to them in Smallville, best friends, and Lex finds a piece of kryptonite, and Clark acts weird, and he throws him out. And, you know, Luthor actually does something pretty amazing with it, you know? And this is what kind of reminds me a little bit of that Birthright ending where he like looks back through time.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, I think this is supposed to be a very explicit call, like forerunner to that moment of like, this was the first time Lex got that door open, you know, like he does at the end of Birthright.
Right.
But I also think the big scene here that speaks the most to me is very subtly Wade is implying or outright saying that Brainiac 5 is lying.
Yeah.
That basically Superman realizes in hindsight he was watching Lex so hard to see if he was lying. He didn't think to watch and see if Brainy was lying. And I buy that. Whatever we think Superman would do, I know of 5 different versions of Brainiac 5, and they all would let Lex Luthor die. So
it kind of makes me think like, I don't know. It's like it's one of those things like if he goes to the future, but like it almost feels like every time he goes to see the Legion, like there's something slightly different because you know the future's not set, the past has variables, especially in what do you call it, in comics where things shift so much, right?
Yeah.
Batman calls that out in the Lightning Saga. He says, you know, this is the 3rd time I've met the Legion and they don't know me, you know, like this. So this is not the Legion that we met in Final Night or either Crisis, you know. This is
so they might not be exactly. They're almost every time you go see them, they're almost never the same people.
Right.
But something that I think doesn't get talked about enough is if you think about it in reverse from the Legion's perspective, think about how many times they come back, and you know we don't keep up with them as much as we keep up with the mainline characters. Mm-hmm. But think about from their perspective, just the regular continuity waves that we experience. They come back and now Clark's never been Superboy. Oh, now he's the new 52 Superman. Oh, you know, now his parents are dead. Now they're alive again. You know, like it's sort of happening in both directions.
Yeah. The one thing that I do think that Bendis did that was kind of cool, I don't know that it fit or should have been done at the time it was done, was when Superboy, when John Kent was the inspiration for the Legion, because he was the reason for kind of the United Planets, you know, even more compassionate than his father was and everything like that. And he was the reason to start in the United Planets. And he was the reason that kind of inspired the Legion in the future. Not specifically Superman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That whole Bendis run, I feel like for every pro, there's a con, but that is one thing. I like that too. I love the timeline that he made going into that Legion series, in which he incorporated every future universe that DC Comics has into one functional timeline. I thought that was brilliant. Unfortunately, it's mired in so much other shenanigan, you know, but some of that Legion stuff he was doing, he had some neat ideas.
I might have that whole Legion run.
I don't know that I can really recommend it in good faith. I don't know. I can't be, because like for everything like that, you have like, Mon-El is now Superman's descendant. and stuff
Yeah,
like
right.
that just really.
Oh yeah, I totally pushed that out of my brain.
And you should have. I hope you can again.
Because I think I'm so blindly pissed off at him for aging John Kent up that anything else he does, I'm just like, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rogolzar is never to be seen or heard from.
Oh,
again.
no one gives a about that guy.
Did you guys see the Rogolzar call out in the timeline that,
Dude,
that Mark Waid just did?
Yeah, I think
is
so.
that in the history?
In the new DC history?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just holding off on that until the whole thing came out so I could read it through.
I don't know if this really counts as a spoiler, but Bendis. Wade does a lot of unzipping Bendis's run. And one of the things that he does is he says Rogolzar is an alien who lied and said he destroyed Krypton in the timeline. And he says, and he refers to the Jor-El from that series as an imposter claiming to be Jor-El.
Good.
Oh,
so I don't, if somebody can get their phone out the next time Bendis and Mark Waid run into each other at a con, I would love to see that interaction.
I would just pretend like it happened, like it was one of those where like somebody like zooms out and it's just fanfic of someone sitting there writing Superman stories, and they're like, no, throw that away.
And it, but then again, for all those moments, there also is like the other moment that I like from the Bendis, and I hate the Bendis run, but the other moment that I like in that is like the idea of Superman founding the UAP. That's such a brilliant, like, why is Superman still so remembered and revered in Legion times? It's because he's their George Washington or Paul Revere or et cetera. I thought that was a brilliant idea, and bring in the UAP. The UAP is still in the DC universe right now, and I think that's a positive change. But it's so mired in other crap, you can't even really sing its praises. Because
the problem is the Bendis run has beautiful artwork.
Oh yeah, Ivan Reyes is Superman artist, gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the problem is like we were talking about that, like how to me writing is always important, but when you have horrible writing with amazing art, it just makes it that much tougher.
We were talking about the Ultimates earlier.
Suit. They wrote out the rebirth suit in that with giving it to Lois to go to outer space to protect her, and then she comes back for whatever reason, doesn't tell him she's back, and she doesn't have the suit. It's just gone. Like
don't even get that. That is one of my biggest complaints of like, just imagine if your spouse took your kid on a trip, then leaves your kid with a stranger who looks like a Bond villain. and then not only does she come home, but she hides from you. Right? Like
for like 3 weeks.
How would you ever trust that person again?
That's
and then what happens with John, that happens because of that, like it.
Yep.
The fact that the only thing that put that marriage back together is that the writer wanted it to be fine. And that's the same thing with John. John goes in I'm sorry, I've got us way off the rails, but John goes in that volcano, and until very recently in comics, suffered no trauma from it. Like in that issue, Clark is like, "Oh, John, that's so sad," and John goes, "It's all right, it's over now." Like it's crazy.
He only spent like 6 years in a volcano.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where why does that work out for the best? Because Bendis wanted it to,
So back to our book.
Right. Yeah.
Superman attempts to take Lex Luthor to Paradise Island. And I like this because I like how, in a way, Superman doesn't he doesn't come to her to actually talk to her, like, and she punches him hardcore. I love it.
I do too. And I've seen this is one of the moments in the story that gets picked on a lot. Like Wonder Woman fans really hate this.
I don't, because I love this quote. There is no sin in simply allowing fate to take its course and making humanity safe. The world trusts you, and you're gonna, keep Luthor alive. Like,
Well, and I don't think a warrior queen is going to have the same morality as Superman, nor do I think that she should.
I think Wonder Woman is the hardest character to write in DC Comics.
I definitely seems that way from her
because she's supposed to be a warrior Amazon, but yet she's supposed to represent love and compassion too. And I think everyone who picks up and writes Wonder Woman cannot decide where she should fall.
I think more than that, I think we can't decide. I have such a bone to pick with the Wonder Woman fan community right now, because they have made themselves so hard to write for. If you put one toe out of line with her origin, with her characterization, I mean, like I've gone on that Reddit and tried to get them to like, well, what Wonder Woman series do you like? And somebody will show up and say George Perez, and somebody else will show up and say, oh, George Perez objectified, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody else say Brian Azzarello. And then somebody will say, oh, Brian Azzarello did blah, 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 blah. And then
at least what made the Azzarello run interesting is because everything that he put, it was not set in the world, basically. It was mainly her in the world of the Greek.
Yeah.
In the Greek pantheon.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good comics, but there aren't any of the Wonder Woman comics that fandom as a whole seems to be holding out for. Mm-hmm. They're being very, very picky to a degree of, like, as Superman fans, Superman has more comics than anybody. How many of them is he your perfect version in? 5? Like if you're holding out for Wonder Woman, for a Wonder Woman story that is absolutely perfect in every way, or it sucks, you're not going to get it very often, mm-hmm. And I think that people online are really mad about this moment because they don't like a more violent Wonder Woman. But I don't like every hero's morality being exactly the same, right? And I think that Wonder Woman and Superman can both be absolutely pure-hearted, good-intentioned heroes from two different cultures, and that still be true, and it manifests very differently. That culturally, she is okay with letting Lex Luthor die. That also, culturally, she is more okay with punching her friend in the mouth. Like, I think a lot of the criticism comes from, oh, she hit him. Okay, well, she's not from where you're from, right? How many times when they pan out on Themyscira are they practicing combat? This is a woman that has a different relationship with being punched in the face than the person reading this on an iPad probably does. And not for nothing too, but Clark's a farm boy, right? I got slugged a couple times by people I really like, and we're cool now. It happens. That doesn't mean that I would be, if the roles were reversed, I wouldn't be okay with Superman punching her, but he's not from the same culture that she is. I don't think that this moment is the Wonder Woman indictment that it seems to be being interpreted as by a lot of people online. I think this is fine. I think it's one of the best moments of the series to me.
And it concludes, I think, where she has Lex in the lasso of truth.
Which is another one of my favorite moments in the series.
I like that she says, it doesn't extract the truth as much as it pulls the truth, but it lets one accept their truth.
Yeah.
And there's a big truth revealed. And what would you say?
James, you want to go first? I was talking a lot just then.
James is like, what? I'm on this podcast?
Sorry.
Wait, huh?
Sorry.
Huh? No. What? What's going on here? No. I mean, I did really love the lasso interaction between them. What truth are you? What truth are you?
Where Lois, or where Wonder Woman's talking to Lex and says he doesn't see you as inferior. If anything, he marvels at your bravery. You're his hero.
Okay. Right.
Even though it's plural, it doesn't make sense, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, just to have the only thing that could have made it more perfect is if it had been Superman himself saying it with the lasso on, because it is a moment where Lex is forced to realize that, like, hey, this thing that cosmically, magically just made me say the thing that I know I really believe to be true agrees with this version of Superman that I have been denying for my whole life. So what does that say? I thought it was a brilliant way to sort of rub Lex's face in his error.
Yeah,
and I
the way
think,
she was talking about his view of humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that without this moment, the twist at the end kind of works for me. I wouldn't buy it if it was the main universe Lex Luthor, but different universe Lex Luthor, maybe I can buy a little more, but it only works for me at all because of this moment. I think if Lex doesn't have this moment with the lasso to see with no pretense that this is what is true, then he doesn't get to the end where he redeems himself.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So then they go to the next logical place, which is...
They look for magic, and they head down towards Atlantis, in particular Tritonus.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting choice. I think it goes back towards, the thoughts of the Bronze Age.
Oh yeah. Well, I think if you gave somebody this comic by itself, and this is another thing that makes me think that it's very Silver Age, Bronze Age inspired. If you gave somebody this comic by themselves and they'd never seen any other Superman media, and then you asked them who Superman's true love is, they would say Laura. They would not say Lois. They would say Lori Lemaris.
Right, and it's so weird that it's her. But when you
but that is an aspect of that era that Superman had, and actually comes back very briefly in the Triangle era as well. But like the idea that Superman really fell in love with this mermaid he can't be with is something that creators that love the Bronze Age love to bring back, and I have basically no. Maybe I'll feel differently someday, but this stirs nothing in me. When I saw Lori Lemaris, I groaned.
I was just like, "Oh, cool," but why isn't it Aquaman? But whatever.
I was just like, "Oh, look, another ex that he's friends with."
Yeah. Well, and I do get the purpose that it serves in the story, because when Lex eats the empathy beans or whatever, he sees the sacrifices that Superman has made, that he thinks Superman has been lying about all along. So it is another moment like the lasso. But unfortunately, his relationship, this happens in a lot of comics with her in it, his relationship with Lori Lemaris is so bizarre. It ruins whatever other moment is supposed to be happening. And also, I think if you had the lasso, you don't need this.
Yep. And then you have them go to Oa, outer space.
Well, you only got 3 issues. You really have to
the new
drive that empathy in Act 2,
That's true, but I was about to say, but this splash page right here has 7 moments I would have rather seen stretched out than Lori.
Yes, the Spectre, Mr. Mixophilic, the
New Gods,
Dominators, the New Gods, and then back to the fortress where Lex is angry.
I mean, yeah, it's everywhere. It's Fifth Dimension. It's on Rand. It's, even the New Gods, the Thanagarians, everything.
And then this is
where
they
really do a yada 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 over a lot of the adventures of trying to save Lex Luthor.
And then this is where Superman tells Lex he's Clark Kent, and he says McDonald, and he says E-I-E-I-O.
I love that running bit throughout the whole series. I thought that was great. I laughed every time, and I thought it was especially great here.
And then
he draws Lex amazing right there. looking so old.
Yeah. I will say, reading it this time, something I got that I didn't get the first time. And I could be putting words in the creator's mouth, so don't. But doesn't this Lex look a lot like Kevin Spacey?
I think I can see a little bit in certain spots. You can also see a withered Gene Hackman in certain ways.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, we even have the line, "Luthor, you poisonous snake."
Oh yeah, right out of Hackman,
where he gets some. You're the Superman who can't even get the girl. My life was great. Stop. What? Vision, hearing, nothing is working. My powers. What have you done to me? Welcome to my world, I guess. And he says, I knew it. Betrayal was the first thing that went through my head. But you tricked me. I'm an imbecile. You never could have come to help me for help. I should have trusted my instincts. Instead, I fell right into your trap. And he says, my hand to God, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then, boom, he speaks the truth. It's a trap. Just not his. And Brainiac shows up. Did anyone see that one coming?
I kind of did.
End of chapter 2. No plug for chapter 3 at the end of this one.
We better play it safe this time.
Exactly. They're like,
come out next month or next year.
Yeah.
And then chapter 3, I like the cover of just kind of Clark Kent and the glasses. I think chapter 2 has the worst cover, to be honest.
Where he's flying over the city?
Yep, because I feel like it has no bearing on the story. The first one kind of does. It's him almost like an angel. This, I think, represents kind of what happens in the story. In a way, we'll talk about. The second one is just, it feels like generic Superman cover. Like it should have been Lex Luthor, like some sort of Lex Luthor on the cover in some way, shape, or form. Something with them together.
It does feel weird that this series is called The Last Days of Luthor and he's never on the cover. Not for one issue. Like,
one of my favorite books of recent that had great covers was the Three Jokers. With just how you had Joker with like, and then Batman and Batgirl and Red Hood and everything. I think I liked what they did their covers, and yeah, it was just great. All right. Let me explain the synopsis on DC's website. Lex is on death's door as a new target emerges to finally take down the Man of Steel. Will Superman be able to face down his danger and save Lex, or will this be the world's greatest hero's biggest failure? Don't miss the pulse-pounding conclusion. Not really sure it's pulse-pounding, but, you know.
Pounded my pulse. Knock the hell out of it.
My heart is still beating.
Unlike Lex's.
Right.
I will say, like I said, I started to say a second ago, I did see Brainiac coming just because they took the time to do Brainiac's whole origin in Kandor. And also, like, they hadn't had a villain thus far. And if you are doing the last Superman story, who is the other villain that needs no introduction? It's Brainiac.
That's true. That's true.
I think my favorite part about it, I love this Brainiac design.
I really like this Brainiac design.
I think it's this perfect blend of like the Gary Frank Brainiac and also kind of an H.R. Geiger sort of thing around the edges. I do wish that he and his drones looked more of a pair. The drones are very George Perez. And I think you could have kept those heads and still had a body that looked more like his technology, but that's a minor nitpick.
You know, so with this story, we find out Brainiac has all the Justice League already captured. Looks like he was busy while they were off world. And we have basically the crux to this is Luthor's getting weaker, Superman's getting weaker. They're trying to find a way to repair and fix his power. they have this thing set up to do something, and basically Superman gives Lex some of his power. And the idea is Lex is going to have powers to fight, while Superman's powers are diminishing because of gold kryptonite forever. And
is it gold kryptonite? I thought that Brainiac had done something where he could no longer absorb.
Because I thought it was gold kryptonite was crushing his hand, but because I don't think he had gold crystals. I don't know.
No,
I thought those were supposed to be the Sunstones.
Maybe I was wrong.
Yeah, it's something that it's just stops his whatever he did to Lex Luthor. It turned Superman's body unable to metabolize sunlight like he used to. So it's not he's not absorbing the sunlight and he's not gaining powers. He's losing his powers.
Meanwhile, Lex is absorbing the solar radiation out of Superman. That's why he's burning up.
It's like reversal, like
But he changes Lex's machine. Lex was going to sacrifice himself so that Superman could get his powers back, and he ends up changing the machine that allows Lex's. He rewrites his cellular structure to match his. So now Lex, he has that ability, but now his cellular structure can do what his does. So that's what gives him the powers.
And see, like this is another point that I had a problem with is like Lex is trying to sacrifice himself to save Superman, which in its way is a heroic moment for him to do the right thing as he goes out. But Superman denies him that and takes his choice away from him. And to me, that doesn't feel like a very Superman thing to do, to take his choice of what he wants to do away from him, and then thus forces upon this new responsibility and everything to Lex of having the powers, hoping that Lex will be a good person and everything with the powers while he no longer has his powers.
It is, I think, again, though, that gets into our generational divide with Mr. Wade of like, this is unfortunately a very Silver Age Superman thing to do. I would say, though, that I think that was part of the problem with the Silver Age Superman was these sort of childish, unthought through morals to stories. But I don't think Mark Waid agrees with us on that, clearly, because that is what this... I think that Mark... And I'll tell you this, too. I think in a lot of ways, this story is a direct response to whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I think that it has been stuck in Mark Waid's craw for 40 years. That story ends with Superman willingly killing Mixius Pitlick. Sorry. I started with Super Friends. I apologize to everybody. He was Mixelplick for a decade before I heard it pronounced the other way.
That's why I just say Mixie. It felt like it helped you like with everything.
But I think this story is supposed to be an ending to the Bronze Age Superman that Mark Waid prefers to the accepted ending, which is whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Because this achieves a lot of the same things, but Lex isn't used as a puppet, which I know bothers him, that Lex is a puppet in Superman's last story, and Superman doesn't kill, which I know drives Mark Waid insane, that Superman makes that decision at the end of that story.
Like I said, it's just not my... It's not my... I mean, you say general, and I agree. I mean, it is, I think there's a lot of generational stuff there. But it just...
I can
feel...
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, it just feels irresponsible of Superman For someone who's supposed to be the world's looking out to him and everything, I think it just feels very irresponsible.
But would it still? It does feel very irresponsible, but does it feel out of character? Yeah, but does it feel out of character with a man who forces his best friend to marry a gorilla to buy himself some time to deal with something for her tribe?
And that's where I feel like, do I need to have knowledge of the whole Bronze universe to enjoy this? Or can I take this just as a story as it is and feel I got something? Just like you said, like,
yeah.
And I think the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is a really good way of looking at it, because in that same way where him giving up his powers, I still feel is like, you left the genie out of the bottle, that Superman is on Earth, that the Earth is protected from Superman, but then you just give up Superman. So what happens when Mongol comes back or Darkseid shows up? No, I'm not Superman anymore.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. It's it's a very old-fashioned DC problem, because that pre-crisis, that was the thing of like continuity kind of existed in DC, but no comics ever seemed to be worried about the previous or next comic in DC, with outside of a few very rare exceptions. Strict continuity was a Marvel feature. And for DC, every comic was self-contained, and if it clashed with what happened in the very next or very previous issue, sorry, and expecting them to honor anything that happened a year before or would happen a year after, that was just straight out the window. And that's also true of this story. Like, I'm not saying that to say that it's not it's a very valid criticism. It's something that is wrong with this book. But it is like a lot of other stuff right now. It is a very old DC mentality, which is, well, what's going to happen in the future? No, that's not this book, is it?
No.
Like, and they seem almost irritated that you would ask, like. But I don't like it either.
Yeah, I mean, Lex does take out Brainiac in this whole thing, and then his body erupts, and this massive red solar explosion, and that's where we get to see the death of Lex Luthor. Tried to outrun the blast with Superman in his arms, and he doesn't make it, but he gets to the edge, and Superman does.
I did have another beef.
Well, Clark does, because he's no longer Superman.
And that's really back to the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow part, is he is no longer Superman, and there is no Superman of this world now.
Yeah. I did have another beef with this, in that, and this is a small one, but it is something that I didn't have the first time through that I did have the second time through. Is one of the things Superman says is, I'm not smart enough to beat Brainiac, so you need the powers and the brains. That bugs me a little bit, because how many times has Superman beat Brainiac? Whatever. I'll buy it. But then for Lex's strategy that Superman would have never been smart enough to think of, to be, I'm going to charge myself up in the sun and then heat vision you really hard. I've seen Clark think of that. Yeah. I've seen him think of it a lot. That's almost like if there was a fire extinguisher box in the Fortress of Solitude, all that's in it is a crumpled up note that says, charge yourself up in the sun and then heat vision somebody real hard. Like, he's got that covered as a plan. I was expecting Luthor to code a virus or invent a machine at super speed or something, Yeah,
start to do some stuff he's boasted about,
Yeah.
Or like enter some sort of like hyper. He starts moving so fast that he's able to do stuff.
The balloon even could have been, I'm going to decapitate you, and Superman would not do that, and I would have bought it,
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. It worked.
All right, so we could keep going little bits here, but I'll probably revisit this in like 5 years or something. just out of curiosity one day and see how I feel. I do that every now and then. But what would you rate it on a letter grade? We'll start with Logan.
So if you had asked me when we talked at Celebration,
Mm-hmm.
I would have put it at an A minus. And I think in hindsight, also I had just finished reading all of DC Comics Presents and Kryptonite Nevermore.
Okay.
Really close to right before I went to Celebration. And I think that being in that Superman mindset made me more forgiving of this comic than I ended up being. So I'm going to drop it down to a B or a B plus tops. Maybe I should meet in the middle, right? It was an A minus the first time. It was a B this time. It'll be a B plus. It is, I think it's a really good comic. I think if you're a big Superman fan, it is worth checking out. That is not to say it does not have its flaws.
James.
Excuse me.
I mean, I think I would give it, because I'm not particularly fond of the stories where, there's no Superman in the end. Kind of wasn't even like a resolution of this wasn't like an end of Superman. Like, so what did Lex Luthor ultimately end up taking down Superman because he's no longer around, like, did he get his wish in the end? But, so ending with Superman not having powers, chapter 2 spending a lot more time in places, especially like Tritonus instead of, and then just having one splash page to yada yada over some of the cosmic stuff, or rather all of the cosmic stuff. I mean, I think, and chapter 1 I thought was pretty darn good for the most part. I did kind of had the same thought process, like, well, if they can just pull their consciousness together and all be tangible in an area, like, could they escape, or would the portal have to be open for them to potentially even thrust somebody out, the way they did Lex Luthor? I don't know. But I would say that with just some of the things that I didn't like about it and the ending, it's a B.
Okay. I'm just gonna
the
go
art
B.
is amazing. The art is amazing the whole way through.
I'm just gonna say B. I think you can kind of come to your conclusion, thinking about everything we've talked about. I think it's a good story. And I just feel like there's things there, but I'm gonna go with B.
B for Brainiac.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, though, again, on the art, if you're listening to this and you've made it this far and you haven't read it, I think I would read it in physical if you can get your hands on it instead of digital.
Yeah,
I know. Talking about physical, the way you brought that up earlier, we did cover Year One, Superman Year One, Frank Miller, a while back, and we got Lori Lemaris in there too. Because Year One of Superman stretched out his entire adult life until he became his entire life until he became Superman. So that was Superman Year One, but
through 10.
Yeah, I would say that this art in that format, I would much rather own all of these than that book.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Yeah, 100%. Although I will say there is something about, I end up looking back at that Year One book sometimes because there is something about John Romita Jr.'s art in that that very much reminds me of the Fleischer cartoons in Golden Age, the way that Superman's depicted, the way the cape falls in the costume, and the way that he moves in the fight. There is something about that I do still enjoy to look at. Not necessarily to read.
Yeah. Yeah, the
story.
story.
The story
John
sucked.
Romita Jr. is not my favorite Superman artist, but there was quite a bit of the DC universe involved in that story, and so he does really good with a lot of other things. He's just not my favorite Superman artist.
He's very hit or miss on Superman. Like I like that one. I like his run with Jeff Johns in the New 52. But
yeah, we reviewed that recently.
Then he had some stuff with Bendis in the Bendis run that was horrible. I mean, you're talking about Connor Kent has salad fingers and stuff like that. Like
I think they was on Action. I think John Romita was on Action on that one. Yeah, it was terrible.
And I can only imagine he was just punching a clock with that, is best I can figure. I mean, when you have a career as long as his is too, when you have a career as long as his is, and he has worked so constantly and so prolifically, there are very few artists that have as many published pages as John Romita Jr. does. They're not all going to be bangers, right? But that Action run is especially indefensible, I think.
All right. Well, Logan, thanks for having us on. Yes. Gosh, I'm tired. I'm worn out. Man.
Being here.
Yeah.
Hey guys, anytime you want to come back. So glad you could make the trip.
Let everybody know where they can find you or talk to you or listen to you or all that fun stuff. I'm done talking. Peace.
All right. You can find me and my wife, Amy, on the Single Bound podcast. We are on Spotify. We are on YouTube, but we are much more on Spotify. We are on a temporary hiatus right now because my wife does our editing and she is pregnant. We're just wrapping up our first trimester and she has been much sicker than I think people thought she was going to be. Everybody's healthy and everything's fine. It's just, it's kind of hard to edit a podcast when you're holding a bucket. But as soon as we get through that, we will be back, and we already have a pretty good back catalog of episodes. So it's a good chance to catch up. You can reach us at singleboundpod@gmail.com if you want to suggest an issue. The premise of the podcast is we do single issue self-contained comic book stories. So we have a very low buy-in. Usually to listen to an episode, you're only going to have to read 20 to 24 pages. And you will have a whole story done and a whole conversation listened to about it. We hope you'll join us.
Awesome. All right. It's a great place to stop and remember.
Look up in the sky!
Thank you for checking out the Krypton Report. Please click our link tree in the show notes to follow us on your favorite social media platform. We have a $1 Patreon, just $1 a month to keep us going. And in return, you get exclusive shows and specials. If you want to join us on an episode, send us an email or a message.
Hi, this is David Patrick Wilson. I played Superman, Clark Kent, in the television production of It's a Bird, It's a Plane. Enjoying every minute of being right here on the Krypton Report.